tail of Hillary Clinton, or maybe he thinks he can get to the White House. Maybe he thinks he can be the head, man. Maybe he thinks he can be the head of a ticket right now. But time will tell, as I said before, as we look at that. And speaking of getting ahead, as I talked about that issue of your mayor, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, let me digress on that for a second, man, because, again, if she could just be wise enough to take a note from her predecessor, Sheila Dixon, or Steli Dixon, and what Steli Dixon did, which was just arrogant stupid, man, to be voting on contracts for Ron Lipscomb and then getting on the train with Ron Lipscomb. She didn't have sense enough to get in her car and have her chauffeur, whose name was Dixon, drive her perhaps to Washington, D.C. and get on a train down at Union Station with Ron Lipscomb. She was getting on the train with him at Penn Station. She's like, how dumb can you be? I mean, how arrogant can you be, Sheila or Steli? But now it looks as if this mayor here has not learned the lessons from Steli Dixon and Ron Lipscomb, that she's going out to Vegas with Kathy Pugh, with Senator Joan Carter Conaway, with the lobbyists or the lobbying firm of Sean Malone and Lisa Harris Jones. So, I mean, it's almost like she's daring the state special prosecutor. It's like she's daring the federal prosecutor and Rod Rosenstein and others to just bring the hammer down on her, man. You would have thought she would have at least been wise enough to learn the lessons and not have those conflict of interest even being raised. You don't even want to give the perception of some conflicts, but she's gone beyond perception. She's gone beyond the perception. As she went out to Vegas to officiate the wedding of Sean Malone and Lisa Harris Jones, knowing that she is going to vote on contracts that they are the lobbyists for, from BG&E to, again, casinos, to much more for sure. And you would think you would have somebody in City Hall, somebody wise enough to pull a coat and say, Madam Mayor, did you not see what happened to Sheila Dixon? And do you think as long as you on the coattail or maybe on, something else of Mr. Garcetti down there from The Wire, Martin O'Malley, perhaps you don't think this is going to happen to you? But again, if I was you, I'd have a conversation with Sheila Dixon, because I'm sure she never thought that Martin O'Malley would offer her up because, again, maybe the state special prosecutor at that time, some say, wanted Martin O'Malley. But Martin O'Malley could have, he could have pardoned Sheila Dixon. He's the governor now. He's on his way out. He could pardon Sheila Dixon. For some of you Sheila Dixon's interfixing, groupies out there, some of you brothers be talking about Sheila Dixon can come back and he could pardon Sheila Dixon. You think y'all could write a petition up for that? Associated Black Charities, Anthony McCartney, and some of the rest of you out here running around championing Sheila Dixon. You think you could get your governor? He can't run again, so maybe he could, do that as a favor to Sheila Dixon. But again, if he's in trouble politically, don't think he won't offer up Stephanie Rawlings Blake or Stephanie Rawlings Fake and some of these others that are running with your governor and your governor's BFF, Sean Malone and Lisa Harris Jones and some of these others around here. So keep your eyes open as the plots will thicken. And his movements have to quicken now so that he can stay in the running or in the gunning if he thinks that he can run for a national position in terms of the vice president or the president of the United States of America. So keep your eye open on that. And I'll come back and get more into that and go deeper into that regarding, again, what we talked about yesterday, the mayor officiating weddings and, of course, everything else that's going on around that right now in terms of her voting on contracts. Is like Jack Young had to recuse himself for voting on many contracts, president of the city council, Jack Young, because him having many relatives that may be working for some of these businesses and corporations and working in City Hall as well. And so at the time when he talking about 51% of the contracts or jobs for these contractors that are doing business with the city should go to city residents. As I said before, he knows the right formula to use. He know how to get 51% of the contract jobs for his family members. If he know how to do that, all he got to do is follow the same formula, man. Follow the same formula. He can get him 51% of the jobs at Hopkins, as he used to work there for them. 51% of the jobs for some of these private contractors for his relatives. Well, he know how to do it for the city employees. So, again, you tuned to the State of the City. But let me get into this article that I wanted to get into tomorrow, as I talked about the memorial service for our young brother, the grandson of Malcolm X, Malcolm Shabazz. And, of course, there was the article that I referenced that was written by the so-called writer, Kirsten West. Now, I'm leery of any black woman with the first name Kirsten, Kirsten. I'm leery of any black woman or sister with the first name Kirsten. That's the first time I even heard of a black woman with the name Kirsten. But, nevertheless, she decided to do this smear job, calling herself, asking about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan deafening silence on the death of Malcolm Shabazz, which was, to me, casting dispersions on the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan by a black writer whose job is supposed to do investigative reporting and investigative writing, supposedly. But when I checked out her Twitter and Facebook, she spent more time talking about scandal. She spent more time talking about some gossip and bossip than she do talking about, again, in-depth investigative reporting and asking questions regarding the death of Malcolm Shabazz, and again, asking the key question of who benefits regarding the death of Malcolm Shabazz, and then asking the who, what, where, when, and why regarding our young brother, and what happened leading up to his death, what was the timeline, the time frame of his death, if he was in Mexico, who invited him to Mexico, how did he get to Mexico, what was his whereabouts, who was on his security team, where was he staying, did he come in on a plane, did he come in on a bus, and if he's the grandson of Malcolm X, who would have him traveling on a bus as opposed to a plane, and laying out all of this itinerary. So this is what a reporter, an investigative reporter, would ask those kind of questions. Who was he traveling with? Who extended the invitation? Who was responsible for his honorarium? Who was responsible for his security? Did he check with the United States Embassy in Mexico since he was killed in Mexico? And last time I checked, Mexico is not a part of the United States of America, and he was killed in Mexico City. So where was the response from the President of the United States or the First Lady, since this isn't a U.S. citizen, since he hadn't denounced his U.S. citizenship? So where's the response from the President of the United States, the response from the U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, the response from the Secretary of State, John Kerry? Because know that if you had a white youth from a prominent family killed in Mexico, that there would be questions asked by the President, by the First Lady, by the Secretary of State, John Kerry, and by, again, the U.S. Ambassador to Mexico. But we have not heard any of that by this so-called investigative reporter. So the question we have to ask is, who is she really working for? What is her real motive? And what are their real motives in trying to insinuate the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan deafening silence on the death of young Malcolm Shabazz, and then spending more time in the article talking about the death of Malcolm X and not the death of Malcolm Shabazz, and know that if the U.S. government had any inclination that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had anything to do with the death of Brother Malcolm X, that they could not have, of course, waited to arrest him and get their hands on them, whether it was in 1965, 1985, 1995, 2005, or just 1205 before I came on the airway. So we clearly have to ask, what is the motive of News One? What is the motive of Kathy Hughes? What's the motive of this reporter, Kirsten West, on the West Coast, where Malcolm Shabazz was working in Oakland, went from California to Mexico, so she clearly could ask those questions of the FBI. And why did they arrest Malcolm back in February when he was on a trip or getting ready to board a plane on his way to Iran? But she hasn't asked those questions, because I think they clearly know, that you're not going to go but so far if you're on the News One networks, because them white corporate dollars that control them will cut them dollars off quickly so that they wouldn't do any investigative reporting. But I thought it was interesting. But let me see if I can play this clip, where she went back to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's message, The Time and What Must Be Done, which he delivered this past Saturday, part 20. The message was an hour long, if not more, but she only went and grabbed 3 minutes and 47 seconds of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan message, which lets you see that she didn't want you to hear all of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's message. She wanted to splice and dice and censor the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, similar to what Kathy Hughes did when she called herself bringing Minister Farrakhan on last year for Mother's Day, but it wasn't Minister Farrakhan live in person and in living color, unscripted. It was a, cut down, sliced and diced, censored version of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So they want him on to get the ratings, but they don't want you to ever hear the man fully for himself because of the corporate controlled dollars that control Radio 1, News 1, and TV 1, if you haven't figured that out by now. So maybe they're really not Radio 1 and News 1, but Views 1, because somebody else pushes the views and then sells it to you as news, as we saw with this writer, Kirsten West, talking about the death of young brother Malcolm Shabazz, but really not stopping and asking all the questions regarding this group, RUMEC, that young Malcolm was supposed to have been working with, were made up of some Mexicans and Mexican construction workers, and we later learned through Dr. Randy Short, through Sister Sabrina, through some other sisters and brothers on the social network media page that this company wasn't even registered in California in any way, shape, or form. So who were they really working for? And, of course, the San Francisco Bay Review, which was the newspaper that Brother J.R. Valley, who Fred Hampton Jr., who I'm going to have back with me, God willing, tomorrow, J.R. Valley, who Fred Hampton had already talked about and warned us his behavior was that of an agent or agent provocateur several times, as I saw an interview he did with young Brother Malcolm on their block report, and how he was trying to press Brother Malcolm and stress Brother Malcolm Shabazz and manipulate young Brother Malcolm Shabazz around the death of his grandfather. Anytime the name Minister Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam came up, he was always trying to see what type of rise he could get out of the young brother, knowing that he may have been reared and taught that Minister Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam killed his grandfather to try to feed and poison the little brother against the Nation of Islam. But as I heard Minister Farrakhan say, he was writing to him. Malcolm Shabazz was when the young brother was locked up. When the young brother was locked up for a crime he did not commit. When he was locked up supposedly for the murder of his grandmother. And as you heard Dick Gregory say on this show and other shows, if you read Dick Gregory's book, Callous on My Soul, in which when I read it years ago, it brought tears to my eyes because I too had been prejudiced toward the young brother before I knew. And you can't fathom the wickedness of Satan or the wickedness of our enemy who would go in and kill Betty Shabazz and then blame her grandson, so that many of you wouldn't even give him the benefit of the doubt, but you would give this racist white media the benefit to say that that little boy killed his grandmother, when you know most little black boys, they love their grandmothers and love their mothers. But we were poisoned and prejudiced toward that little boy at the age of 12 years old. And told and sold that he murdered his grandmother. So imagine even the Shabazz family and how they were told. But we would later learn that it was not young brother Malcolm, but other forces that murdered Betty Shabazz. And then they locked him up, and you don't know what happened and what they did to that little brother while he was locked up since the age of 12. Like with your little boys today, you don't know what they do to them in these institutions. You know what they do to them in these killing fields called public schools. But you don't know what they do to them in these institutions, what type of experimentations they use on them, what type of penal coercion they use on these young men. So when they come out, they look grown, but they're not grown. But that's why this has to be talked about and opened up, and the envelope has to be expanded. We have to ask about J.R. Valley. What's his relationship to a sister who I love and love tremendously, and former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney? And how did he treat Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney? How did he treat Brother Malcolm? Was he trying to manipulate Brother Malcolm Shabazz for his benefit? Since we found out after the death of young Brother Malcolm Shabazz that they were posting and had already posted the book that they claim he was working on and writing on the San Francisco Bay Review before the culprits, before the suspects had been arrested, before the facts were found out regarding young Brother Malcolm Shabazz. Here was a newspaper, here was a website, here was a young man in J.R. Valley that was already promoting Malcolm Shabazz's book entitled Still by Any Means Necessary. Before he even expressed condolences, before he even expressed the facts and the acts regarding what happened to Malcolm Shabazz, they were trying to already profit off of his death. So you always look at those kind of things that come out, or type of behaviors or those type of activities after the death of Malcolm Shabazz. I reached out to Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, wanting to find out what does she know about this group and organization RUMAC. Was there any relationship between her and this group and organization Rumat? Did she know them? Then she strangely stopped tweeting, stopped responding. So I